Hello, and welcome to the hand time movement guide for speedrunning. In this video, I'll be going in depth into all of the possible movement that you can do in this game. It'll be going from as simple as sprint jumping, to dive boosting, and to eventually learning how to do a lag TSJ. This video will be split into multiple categories, and we'll be starting off with the very basics. Alright, so the most basic way of going fast in this game is sprinting. Sprinting can be done by holding the hat ability button while having the sprint hat equipped. Sprinting will look something like this, and it'll give you, as you can see in the top left, about 600 speed. Compare this to walking, which gives you 400. While you're sprinting, you can also do a jump. A jump will give you 680 speed, which makes it faster than just sprinting. So it's better to spam sprint jumps than to just sprint in a straight line, because it does give you more speed. Another form of jumping that you can do is jumping while walking. This is less speed, but it allows you to do a second jump in mid-air. Now that we've covered the double jump and the sprint jump, I'll be covering the wall jump. For wall jump, you need a wall just like this one. You jump onto the wall, and then you simply jump again. If you do a walking jump into the wall, you can do a second jump after the wall jump, just like that. If you do a sprint jump into the wall, you can only do one jump off the wall. If you do a double jump into the wall, you can also only do one wall jump. You can also do multiple wall jumps in a row by finding two walls that are next to each other, just like this, and just hitting the jump button. This will make you go back and forth, until eventually you get to the top. The last form of really basic movement is diving. Diving can be done mid-air, but also on the ground if you have enough speed. As you can see here, I can do a jump and then dive. I can be walking and dive, but if I'm standing still, the dive button will just make me crawl. So if you want to dive on the ground, make sure you have a little bit of a running start. It doesn't need to be very long, but just make sure you're holding the direction. After diving in the air on the ground, you can do a dive cancel, which is done simply by pressing the dive button again. Another thing you can do with diving is a dive boost. A dive boost is done by, first of all, diving, and then hitting the dive button again as soon as you land on the ground. It'll look something like this. And if you look at the top left at our speed, you can see this gives us an average of 960 speed, which is quite fast. This makes dive boosting the fastest form of movement on a flat surface. Now, if you're looking at the speed counter, you can see it kind of differs after the dive boost. It goes from 940 to sometimes 980, and this is dependent on when you dive boost. So when you land on the ground, the earlier you hit the dive button, the more speed you will get. There's something pretty important to know about wall jumps that contains diving. So when you dive at a wall, you're obviously going to bonk. But if you dive and then cancel, you can actually wall climb. Now something pretty important here is if you dive cancel into a wall and then wall jump, you'll not be able to do more wall jumps in a row like I did earlier. To dive after a wall jump, you can single jump into the wall jump, and dive. This can also be done after the second jump, just like that. This cannot be done after a sprint jump into the wall. And another useful thing to know is that when you're climbing a wall, you can hit the dive button to let go of the wall and fall down. And that pretty much covers the very basics that you need to know. Now we're going to be moving on to the movement exploits. So the movement exploits are unintended ways in the game that you can jump. These ways are the SDJ, or the sprint double jump, the DSJ, the double sprint jump, and the TSJ, which is a triple sprint jump. First off, we're going to be starting off with the SDJ. The SDJ is a sprint double jump. As we learned earlier, when you're sprinting, you can only do one jump. And when you're walking, that's when you can do a double jump. But this can be exploited. When you're sprinting, you can release the sprint button and immediately jump to get a sprint double jump. This timing is pretty precise. You need to jump within 2 frames of letting go of sprint, which can be pretty hard. As you can see, this allows you to do a double jump at 600 speed, which previously wasn't possible. This allows you to go much further than the game intends, and allows for some really cool skips. I'd say this is a pretty intermediate way of jumping, and it's something you won't be using at the start, but it's definitely something you should be practicing a lot to make sure you're good at it once you're at an intermediate level. Now we're moving on to the double sprint jump, or the DSJ. The DSJ works by sprinting at a ledge and then double tapping the jump button once you're on the ledge. So it'll look something like this. Here's a side-by-side comparison of a sprint jump and a DSJ, so you can see the difference. As you can see, the DSJ gets a lot more height, and this is a really useful technique. I definitely recommend learning this, but again, just like the SCJ, it is kind of intermediate level. So just like the SCJ, you probably won't be doing these at a beginner level, but it is quite useful to start learning them early on, or at least know what they mean. Now we're moving on to the TSJ. The TSJ is kind of a combination between an SCJ and a DSJ. It's pretty hard to understand, but I'm going to try and explain it. So a TSJ will give you a DSJ-like jump at first, and then allows you to do even another jump on top of that. And it'll look something like this. So you see how I went up and then I was able to do a second jump to turn around, or technically a third jump. So you want to be holding sprint and going towards the ledge. Once you're on the very edge, just like the DSJ, you want to hit jump. Then, as quick as you can, release the sprint and jump again. You want to do this in a very quick motion. It's like a DSJ, but imagine in between the 2 jumps, you release sprint. Then, once you've done that, you can do another jump whenever you want. Alright, so those are all the movement exploits. These can seem a little bit tricky, and they're definitely quite hard when you're starting out, so don't be discouraged if you don't get them right away. They take a lot of practice, and even the best speedrunners in the world will sometimes miss them in runs. I'm just teaching you about it now because it is very useful to start practicing them early on, so that once you get at an intermediate level, you can do them quite consistently. Alright, so before we move on to the next part, I want to explain to you guys a term called buffering. If you've speedrun a different game, you definitely know what the term means, but if you're new, you might not. So buffering is basically when you hold an input before it can happen, and then because you're holding it, it will happen as soon as it can. I think a great example of this is the hookshot. Now, keep in mind for this, you do need input assist on, which is why you want it on. And what this allows you to do is, before this left mouse button prompt appears, you can already start holding left mouse button. Here, I think a great way to show this is I will Diveboost over here. I will hold the left mouse button even during the dive boost, and I will instantly attach on the hook shot. See? I was holding it way before the prompt even appeared, and before I could even do it. So another example of buffering is holding inputs during a loading screen so that they happen as soon as possible after the loading screen. I think a great example of this is when you're exiting a level in Subcon and you want to move as soon as possible. Let me show you. Alright, so I'm exiting a level from Subcon. I'm going to hold down and dive. And then as soon as the screen is over, HatKit instantly dives downwards. It's pretty useful, and you probably won't be using it much as a beginner, but it's nice to know what buffering means when you're talking to other speedrunners, so you understand the terms that they're using. And now we're going to be moving on to movement using lag. Now I'm going to be talking about the movement using lag. In this game we have a program called HatLag, which binds lagging the game for 400 milliseconds to a simple button on your keyboard, or even your controller if you've set that up. If you want to know how to download HatLag and set that up, you can check out Doka's setup guide, which will be in the description. Now that you've done that, I'm going to be talking about the movement using lag. Lag can do a lot of things to your movement, and mostly it'll make it a lot easier. So I'm going to be starting off with the easiest one. It's the lag SCJ. Now, a lag SCJ can be a little bit tricky once you start doing it off an edge, which I'll get into in a bit. But starting off, lagging can make an SCJ a lot easier, especially when you're starting out and you want to implement SCJs into your runs. Lagging is going to make it a lot more consistent. So the way a normal lag SCJ will work is you'll be sprinting, you hit the lag button, during the lag you let go of sprint, and you buffer a jump, which, as I explained earlier, just means that you're going to hold jump during the lag, and then once the lag ends, your jump is going to happen. Even though this is more consistent, obviously you're losing time by freezing the game for 400 milliseconds. Personally, I recommend only doing lag SCJs when the SCJ is really risky and can lose a lot of time if you're missing it. Other than that, I would just recommend doing normal SCJs to kind of get used to it, because it will save you time in the long run. Now, when trying to do a lag SCJ off a ledge, it's quite a bit different. On controller, it's the exact same thing. You walk towards the edge with sprinting, you lag, let go of sprint, and you jump. On keyboard though, it is a lot different. So to be able to lag SCJ on keyboard and mouse, we're going to need to make use of hat switching, and specifically hat switching on the scroll wheel. So to bind hat switching on the scroll wheel, you need to go into the keyboard.ini file, and I'll show you right now how to do that. Alright, so here we are in my Hat in Time folder. You can go here by just browsing local files on Steam. You're going to go into Hat in Time Game, Config, Gamepads, and open up keyboard.ini. It'll open this in Notepad by default, which is just fine. You're going to go all the way down, and then there's going to be right here, Hat hotkey left and Hat hotkey right. You want to put these on button ID 257 and 256. If you're going to commit to switching your hat switching to scroll wheel instead of 2 and 3, which are the default binds, I recommend just switching completely. Never use 2 and 3 again, because if you have both of them binded at the same time, it's going to be a turbo, which looks like this. So if you want to switch one hat to the right, you press 3 and it switches 2 hats to the right because it's that fast. So you definitely just want to use the scroll wheel. Now again, lag SCJing is a very advanced technique. You don't really start doing it until you get a top 40, maybe top 30 time. So definitely don't worry about it if you're a beginner. Just stick to 2 and 3 for hat switching if that's what you want to do. And if you don't think lag SCJing off an edge, which you really only use in murder route, which is again an advanced route, then it's not worth it. If you are switching to scroll though, unbind zoom out and zoom in from your scroll. Otherwise, when you scroll to switch hats, your camera is also going to be zooming out. Do bind a different button to zoom in though, otherwise you won't be able to quickly go back to hub during the roulettes, because scrolling down in the menu is binded to this. Alright, so here we are in Murder on the Owl Express. This is the main place where you'll do a Lagshot J off a ledge, which is right here. You're going to be jumping all the way across to that locked door. So now I'm going to run you through on how it works. It's kind of the same inputs as a Lagshot J that's not off a ledge. It's just you do a hat switch in between, or you do a hat switch during the lag. It's going to look something like this. You can look at my inputs. I have scroll up on hat switch. It doesn't really matter which hat you switch to, but considering that when you're holding shift, top hat does this, I recommend switching to brewer. So it's going to look something like this. So that right there is what a Lagshot J looks like. One very important factor to the Lagshot J is that you either release shift during the lag, or that you switch back to sprint hat before you try diving. If you throw a brewer potion and then try to dive, the dive will be very delayed. So you want to make sure that you don't throw a potion. I guess you can also just keep holding shift, keep charging that brewer until you're at the very end. But I recommend either just switching to sprint or to let go of shift during the lag. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit tricky. Basically, don't throw a brewer. That's all. But yeah, that's Lagshot J. Alright, so now that we've done the Lagshot J, there's also a Lagdsj. So the Lagdsj is pretty similar to the Lagshot J in a sense that it is just more consistent. So first I'll just explain how to do a Lagdsj. The way to do a Lagdsj is you do a DSJ, except you lag before you do it. This kind of eliminates the positioning, so you don't need to be very precise by being directly on the edge when you do the first jump. I'd say a lag timing is like around here, and then you can lag. Once the lag is over, you're just going to do a DSJ. What this also allows for is to DSJ off the edge. Like when you start the DSJ, it'll be like right there. But it's not that beneficial. So I'll show you. There you go, and that is a lag DSJ. Again, this is pretty much the exact same thing as a DSJ. You just lag to make it a little bit less precise. Alright, so now for the lag TSJ, it is pretty much the exact same thing. You sprint towards a ledge, you lag, and then you do the exact inputs for a TSJ. I'm not going to go too much into detail with this one because, well, I've already explained the TSJ. I'll just show you what it looks like. And there you go, that is a lag TSJ. Alright, so now that we've done all the jumps that are possible with lag, we're going to be doing the lag dive boost. Now you could say the lag dive boost makes it more consistent, but it also gives you more speed. So it's technically better. Now that doesn't really mean that it's faster because again, you are freezing the game for 400 milliseconds, making it slower, but in some places it does actually save time. So again, there's a difference here between keyboard and mouse and controller. Personally, I'm a keyboard and mouse player, but I'm going to try and explain how to do it on controller as well. So to do a lag dive boost on keyboard and mouse is actually a lot easier. So the way it works, you just dive, and then right before you dive boost, you click lag, and then you just buffer the dive button. As I explained earlier, buffering, you just hold during the lag, basically. And it'll look something like this. If you look at my speed, it goes over 1,500. Or, sorry, not 1,500, over 1,000 at least. Now to do this on controller is a little bit more tricky. There's a whole setup that goes through it, kind of like what we did with the Lagshot for keyboard and mouse. So first of all, shout out to Kaz, he's a controller player, he's really good at the game, and he explained to me how to do it on controller so I can explain it to you guys. So first you want to bind a different button to dive on keyboard and mouse. I'm guessing you do this through the keyboard.ini file, the same way we binded the scroll wheel for hat switching on the lag SCJ. Then using the Steam controller config, which I believe is explained in Doka's guide, you can check that out again. You want to bind one of your controller buttons to the button that you bind a dive to on your keyboard. Then for actually doing the lag dive boost, you just dive, you lag right before the dive boost, you hold the button, whichever one you bind it to the button that's binded to dive. Then when the lag ends, you're going to let go of that button and then press your normal dive button on the controller. The normal dive button at the end is not necessary, technically, but if you don't do it, there's a high chance that your next normal dive input will just not happen. So it's a good thing to get used to. So now that you know how to lag dive boost, I'm going to show you a few examples where lag dive boosting actually saves time. Now I'm going to be telling you about Lagshots, but first, ice hat slingshots. So even though this is another category of movement with lag, I'm first going to be telling you about ice hat slingshot, which doesn't use lag. So an ice hat slingshot is when you use an ice hat on a slope and you let go once you have speed, basically. So I'm going to showcase it right here, just like that. As you can see, I have a lot of speed. Now an important thing is that you do hold the direction. If I hold neutral, I'll just lose my speed very quickly. We can combine this with lag. So as you can see, I kind of needed the entire slope to really get a lot of speed. If I use a little bit, I'm not going to get a lot of speed. But if we lag, it allows us to use the tiniest slope you can imagine and still gain a lot of speed. I'll do a lag shot right here, and you'll see how little slope I really need. There you go. I used about one of these tiles, if that's what you want to call it, and I gained even more speed than I did using the entire slope without lag. So it is very useful. Now to do this, you're gonna hit the hat ability and hold whatever direction you're gonna go in. Once you see Hat Kid slide, you're going to hit the lag button, and then after or during the lag, you're gonna let go of the ice hat. It's as simple as that. Just make sure you don't release the ice hat before the lag. That is very important. Now there's another variant of this that you can do. You can do a lag shot that gives a lot more height. I personally find this a lot harder than a normal lag shot, and there's not really an official name for it. So in heating up Mafia Town, there's this lag shot that we do to get over to the faucet that's way back there. Now if I just do a normal lag shot here, you see there's no way I go high enough, and if I jump, I land all the way over here, but the faucet's all the way over there. Now there's a solution to this. What you can do is after the lag, keep holding the ice hat button, and then release the ice hat button and jump at pretty much the same time. It'll look something like this. As you can see, I pretty much get an extra jump, and I make it to the faucet. So that's everything for movement using lag. Alright, so as a final little bit of a bonus movement strat that I'm going to show you, it is a slingshot. So the way a slingshot works is when you're kind of like right in between a wall and a floor, like you're just hugging the wall, and you jump, the first frame that you land, you will maintain all your speed. And a good example of this is in Welcome to Mafia Town. You can dive boost here, and then in this corner, when you're hugging the wall, there we go, you can get a slingshot. So as you can see, after a dive boost, the slingshot is really fast. Now the way the jump is done is, of course, you need a first frame, but you can kind of buffer it. If you play around a little bit, I recommend playing around with it with sprint jumps, because if you try it with a single jump, you're just going to double jump. But you can start jumping slightly before you land. I think if I put it in slow-mo, and if you look at the input display, you'll see that I hit spacebar slightly before. But yeah, that's how you do a slingshot. Now, as a very final thing, I just want to give you some extra information about the very basic movement. And this is mainly about slopes. So, going up slopes, the fastest way of movement is usually sprint jumping. So for example, this slope right here in Finale, the fastest movement up here is sprint jumping, because it does give you more than 600 speed. So you want to do this as much as possible. Then once you get onto this flat surface, as we learned, dive boosting is the fastest. Again, it's not lag dive boosting, it does give us more speed, but we're freezing the game for 400 milliseconds. Then here we're going to be sprint jumping again, because it is the fastest on a slope. And then flat surface, which is dive boosting. And then this staircase, even though you might think it's a slope, if we jump, as you can see, HatKid just kind of gets stuck on the stairs. So for slopes like this, you just want to sprint. Now, I forgot to mention this, but you might have thought, well, why don't you just dive boost up slopes? Isn't that fast? Well, you can go ahead and try to dive boost up that slope. Trust me, it is very slow, and you'll see why when you try. But there's an exception to this. There's definitely a few slopes in the game that aren't steep enough to make dive boosts slow. A good example for this is the one at the end of Deadbird Studio. Spamming dive boost up this is the fastest way. There's a lot of slight slopes like this in Subcon Forest too, where again it is fastest to do that. Just like this. So yeah, that is a wonderful exception to that. You just need to try a little bit around, maybe look at some top level runs to see where they dive boost and where they don't, to maybe kind of get used to that. Another tiny thing to note as a final thing is a downward slope does give you more speed when you dive boost on it. Of course, this is a very slight slope, so it's not going to make that much of a difference, but if I dive boost on this, I'm going to get about 100 more speed than one on a flat surface. As you can see there, I got about 1050 speed. So yeah, that's pretty useful to know. Alright, so that is going to be it for the Hat in Time movement guide. I've put a lot of time into this video, and I hope it's useful to you. I hope you learned something, and I hope this helps you with starting out with a Hat in Time. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to join the Boop Troop Discord and ask questions there. If there's something that you don't understand or you need help with. But for now, thank you a lot for watching, and I wish you the best of luck on your Hat in Time speedrunning career. Bye bye.